Native women who mysteriously gone, and now we don't live long. Your legacy lives on. This is more than just a song, it's a message from beyond. Ooh, it's time we spoke it. It's time we rose to our feet. It's time we chose to believe. Yeah, yeah. Ooh, it's time we spoke it.
So I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Tuesday, May 7th. We opened up with Jay Fastcloud, by the way, and that's It's Time. It's his latest release dedicated to missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a topic we will discuss a little bit today. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We don't do prayers or buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. We may step on a few toes along the way, but our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that is being heaped upon us, and we do it all right here from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. But first, let me remind people our audio streams live at www.letstalknative.com, and we stream live video of the show on Facebook Live. Our shows are available as podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And we post the video of our show on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I am the host of Let's Talk Native, and I'm assisted by Jake Proud here in studio, who's managing our video and our sound. Look, my guest today is James Sogoyeta Gray, longtime friend. We've been in the trenches together for many, many years, and frankly, we've got some new equipment, so we're hoping we can do our phone interviews a little bit better. So James is joining us from Akwesasne, and we want to talk about a couple of things, a few things that are cropping up in our never-ending battle against fossil fuels infrastructure coming into our territories. But I also do want to spend some time talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women and some of the things that we as men need to do in our territories to do what our basic responsibility should be. And it's not just about being, about patriarchy and, or any of that. It's about the role that we play as, as husbands, as fathers, as uncles, and what we should be doing to not only defend our children, our boys and girls, but our women, not just against the violence perpetrated against our loved ones from the outside, but frankly stepping up against the violence that is perpetrated by some of the men in our territory. So we'll get into all that. So, but first, let me go ahead and introduce my very dear and very old friend. Not that he's old; we've just been friends for a long time. My friend James Gray. James, thanks for joining me.
Fergo, nice to be on again.
Well, and we talk quite often, not always on the on the radio. So trying to tune in my my new my new equipment here, so we can do this more often. So that's what we're trying to do here. Hey, first, maybe you could give a little insight. I know I talked to Laurie Begay from Lac de Flambeau. But perhaps you want to give a little bit of a background on what's happening in Minnesota. Again, the villain in the story is Enbridge, but not Enbridge by themselves. Maybe we could start with that before we get into the main topic on missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Yeah, I recently spoke to Lori a few days ago before I introduced her to you to talk, and she was calling out and looking for help to help her on her land to stop Enbridge. But also, and I had talked to her about, it's not only Enbridge, it's our own people who are falling for these promises made by the state, the federal government, and the corporations. And I had mentioned to her that, we need to really address a lot of things. All these things are happening all over Turtle Island, both the north, south, and now the far south. And so this thing is that they're trying to run a pipeline through her property, her personal property, on the territory in Lac de Flambeau, and she's trying to stop them, and she's asked me if I can assist her. I've been, we've both been part of the Warrior Society, as I call it, and we call it Lo Disconnegueta.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been part of that for a while. And like you said, we've been in a lot of trenches and get into all the different situations. And we always run, and not only our people, but all the peoples on all the territories have those disputes within, you know, and a lot of it is due to the influence that is put on tribal councils and band councils.
Well, and we
Uh,
can't ignore the fact that, beyond just ceding to the pressure from the outside is, there's some bad actors in our own territory who are guilty of corruption and basically playing for the other team. And this really got glossed over quite a bit, although it wasn't completely ignored in out at Standing Rock. And in Standing Rock, you had a situation where Dave Archambault, who was the tribal chairman at the time, was really cozy with Barack Obama. You had his sister, who was the senior policy advisor to the Obama administration, and so they had plenty of access from Standing Rock to the president of the United States, and that access didn't protect them. If anything, it put them in harm's way, because it was during the Obama administration that Standing Rock was not just proposed, but it was launched, the Dakota Access Pipeline, I'm sorry, was launched and proposed and built. I mean, it was pretty much all built by the time Trump would take office. And we don't hold these people accountable. And even as we do, even as we get involved in these battles, and this is something else you and I talked about earlier, we also have these guys who turn every one of these events into a platform for self-promotion. And I don't even have to mention names, but certainly others listening to the show can feel free to weigh in. There are plenty of people who got famous over Standing Rock, and yet we lose sight of what the battle is really all about, and who we're fighting against. I mean, it was really ironic that the moment there was President Obama, Barack Obama, had given a slight reprieve, they were lighting off fireworks. They had a fireworks display. It's like they were so prepared to do this show that they forgot that this was only going to be a temporary fix anyway. But I guess last week, or my last show, I talked about how when we're dealing with decolonization, we are not just fighting the outside, because we've got an awful lot of people that are very close to us and look a lot like us in our territories who found very, very comfortable places within those systems of oppression. They've carved out niches for themselves where they not only become, who's your favorite Indian kind of thing, but they not only gain popularity and fame, but they gain fortune. And so when I look at what Lori Begay is facing up there in Lac de Flambeau, that her biggest obstacle perhaps isn't even Enbridge. It may very well be the tribal council themselves that have sold out the rights to do these kinds of things on their land without the will of the people.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part of it, is how our people think that this little bit of money that's going to come in to possibly destroy our land, our water, that's going to go somewhere, and the majority of that money doesn't even make it out to the people. And a good example is Standing Rock. They got millions and millions of dollars, and everybody started arguing where that millions of dollars went. A lot went to the Standing Rock Tribal Council, and probably particular ones in there. And like you said, we won't mention names, but there's a lot of names in all our territories that are under that, and they're just simply selling us out. They're selling everything. Everybody comes up, and it takes a while, and our people are starting to understand it and are starting to fight over it. But the majority of the so-called Native people are falling into the same system. They're not only falling in for the government money that's happening, but they're also all running for congressmen and senators, and all these positions that doesn't help our people.
Well, and even the ones that like Assembly of First Nations, the chief of the Assembly of First Nation, or NCAI. I remember a few years back when Brian Clattersby was the president of the National Congress of the American Indian, and I remember him doing the State of Indian Nations address. They used to do this right after the president of the United States would do their State of the Nation address, and I remember him specifically saying that. And I think it was either 10 or 20% of the United States energy resources lie on native territories. And I'm thinking, did he just put the for sale sign out or what? I mean, for one thing, if there's that much, if there's the equivalent of 20% or even 10% of the United States energy needs are on our territory, then why is he calling it their resources? I mean, he literally said that 10% or 20% of the United States energy resources it's theirs already, that they're on our lands. I mean, if it's 10 or 20% of the U.S. needs, then it's frankly, even if you were to want to get into that business, that would be enough energy to supply us for thousands of years. I mean, we're a small population compared to the United States, but when I hear these guys do this stuff, you realize that they aren't representing us. They measure who we are based on the value that we play to white people, and that's a problem. That's a big problem.
Yeah, and the same thing happens in Canada, what they call Canada. I'm a big proponent of telling people that I speak with that there is no Canada, there is no government or country of Canada. Canada does not have a language. They do not have a culture. They do not have titleship to the land. And the same thing happened with the minerals when they start taking the minerals from the land. They came about and said, well, we'll make what we make out of the 100%. We'll take 60% to England, and we'll leave 40% to the native people. And then they come about and say, oh, well, the native people can't really handle that. So we'll put it in a trust fund, which we will handle, and we will give it to them.
You can't even get an accounting of that trust fund. I mean, there's some numbers that talk about trillions of dollars being in that thing if it were ever accurately or transparently dealt with. But so for them to have taken put the monetary value on those resources and then say that we are somehow incompetent to take possession. It's that whole ward of the state thing. When you got Canada, the United States, and there was a congressman just a couple of years ago who literally stood up and said, "Well, Native people are just wards of the state. They can't make the decisions over their own land." I mean, and when you say that, what you're saying is that we're somehow incompetent, that we are invalids, we are somehow not developed enough. We carried ourselves for 130,000 years, and now these guys are going to say that we are somehow incompetent of carrying ourselves in today. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, and right from the beginning, they said we were not humans.
Yeah,
and so they put that thing on us to say that we're not human beings, and there's still a lot of places that they have things against our people. In Nova Scotia, they still have bonkies on our heads. And people don't understand that. And the majority of the people who are Canadians and Americans don't even understand that themselves, that these things are going on. And, everybody talks about, the congresswoman who talked about Israel.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Omar,
yeah, and she got condemned for that. And she even got attacked, even by Donald Trump. And
she got attacked by her own party, by the Democrats. They made her walk it back, right?
That's right. Yeah, and they don't understand the true history.
And and the crazy part is the native woman, one of the native women who just got elected into Congress, that Deborah Haaland, she was one of the voices condemning her for making those comments against Israel. So I mean, again, when you look at who our people are and the level of again, those comfortable places that some of our own people have found within those systems of oppression. I mean, when Deborah Haaland and Sharice David got elected into Congress, I've said, well, there you go. Now they're a part of the ruling class.
Right.
Now they're a part of who we fight against, because they're not going to make any effective changes. And, I hear Deborah Haaland talking, the letters MMIW roll off her tongue, but the problem, and this is, you and I will get into this in the second half of the show, but the problem is, anybody who thinks that our situations need to be solved by an act of Congress, I mean, our issues are local. I mean, how we deal with a missing daughter or a missing niece or whatever. I mean, I'm not expecting the feds to take care of that. And the abuse to our children being taken and put into white foster care or whatever else. I mean, I'm not expecting the Indian Child Welfare Act to solve that problem. I mean, I had a friend of mine who was a part of the Two-Spirit community, and he was really, really excited about the fact that Sharice David is a part of the LGBT community. And that somehow it was going to affect, because he was bullied in his community. I says, well, you think they're going to stop bullying in a local Native territory by passing federal legislation? You think that top-down approach is the way that we deal with issues in where our kids go to school? I mean, this isn't something that you're going to have the President of the United States or Congress legislate to fix. These are things that we have to take on head on, ourselves in our own communities. We need to affect the change. We can't ask white people to pass laws to protect us all the time.
Right. And they're always talking about protection, like you're saying. How are they going to protect us? How is the government going to protect us?
Well, I mentioned that last week. This is a topic that I actually want to do a show on, because there's this like myth that we've entered into these treaties with the United States, and part of their obligation in those treaties is to protect us. And when people think of this idea of a protectorate nation, when one country offers another country its protection, what they're offering is protection against other countries. But in the situation with us, our own people seem to be confused. The United States, to the extent that they offered anything, it was protection from them. So they're not protecting us from some outside a threat or some threat of another country coming into our territories. What they claim to be doing, which they failed miserably at, is protecting them, trying to hold back their own citizenry from stealing our land, from taking our resources, committing crimes. 70% of the violence against Native people is perpetrated by non-Native people coming onto our territories or residing in our territories. And they've manipulated their laws, so almost forbidding us from taking, for holding these non-Native people accountable for the violence they commit against our women. And even some of these territories that have police departments or courts and all that other stuff, says, no, we're not going to allow you to prosecute a white person in your courts or be arrested by your police. I mean, this is the way we've been treated in all of this. So, I mean, we aren't asserting our own right to protect our own people. And even as we've emulated their systems of police and courts and stuff like that, we still end up in a situation where the United States says, no, it's only we can prosecute white people. You can't do it. Only we can protect you from our people. You can't do it yourselves. And so when they fail miserably at it, like I said, 70% of the violence against Native women is being perpetrated every day by non-native people. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, and to think about the system they have and they push on native territories. When they push their laws, they push their laws in there, and our tribal councils and across the country are following the laws of the United States.
Well, I mean, look at Akwesasne. I mean, the St. Regis Tribal Police, or even the police on the Canadian, what they consider the Canadian side, the tribal police under the MCA, they're not enforcing any native statutes. We don't even have those.
No.
They're enforcing state law or U.S. law or state law or provincial law or Canadian law. And that's what, and this is what kind of showed itself in obviously the standoffs over the cannabis dispensaries. But you yourself face this when the tribal police were arresting you and other guys from the men's council of the Great Law Longhouse for gaming. You had the tribal police arresting you for for a federal statute.
Right.
Which you ultimately beat, but I mean it was a St. Regis tribal police that were working on behalf of the United States and the U.S. prosecutor.
Right, and it was the United States themselves too coming in with their attorneys, which they had no jurisdiction, or New York State had no jurisdiction, and they sat down to try to figure out how they were going to charge us.
Yeah.
See,
this is the stuff that and I don't know, even as we talk with people in various communities about what we need to do as people and as men in particular to deal with this missing and murdered Indigenous women. We're going to have people, both men and women, say, "Well, we need to we need to get the state law enforcement more involved. We need to get the federal law enforcement more involved." And so when guys like you or I enter the conversation, we say, no, that's not our system, and they are already involved. They're involved as much as they want to be involved, and in fact, most of their involvement undermines our ability to protect our own people. And so these are tough conversations, and it gets back to that same thing that I said last week. When we talk about decolonization, we have an awful lot of people on our own territories who are saying, well, we need to use their system. We need to emulate their system. We need their kind of regulations. We need their kind of police. We need their kind of crime and punishment. And instead of coming up with our own unique way based on who we are in a given territory, with how what we call restorative justice. We don't. I mean, that's almost a new term, but that's been something that's been a part of our system since the ancient times. I mean, we've always taken a position on resolving a conflict, not necessarily punishing people for misdeeds. I mean, we're in a place now where that's the way it's viewed because we've never addressed the problems early on enough to say, look, we're creating a problem that we need to address before it gets out of hand. Now we've got drug problems on our territory. We've got substance abuse problems. We've got crimes being committed on our territory. We've got people who are fronting for crimes to be committed by other people on our territories. And these so this is what we've come to. And again, what I think oftentimes are even the bigger crimes are the crimes being committed by elected officials who are selling out to the state or the federal government or multinational corporations, involved in extractive industries. I mean, this is what we're faced with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's happening. It happens all over. That's why Lori is facing the issue she faces with her own people. They're the ones that are pushing these things. They're the ones that are letting Enbridge do what they need to do, letting the state do what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, how do we take the position, and how do we say the United States has an obligation to protect us when the people who claim to represent us are saying, oh no, you don't need to protect her. We've already made the decision. So
right.
I mean, we got to battle not only the United States and the multinational corporations that have the backing by the United States, but we got to tackle our own people on these issues, and that's what Lori's facing in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Hey, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll take a break. We'll go off with some music and just catch our breath a little bit, and we'll come back. And but I want to get into this. You and I start talking about some very specific things, and our own aversion to just belaboring a point about all that is happening to us without coming up with an action plan. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. This is John Kane with James Gray, Sogayeta, on Let's Talk Native, and we'll be right back after this.
Did you ever cry out in the pouring rain? separate. Did you ever feel like you're going insane? Oh, then you feel like me. Ever since you went away. Did you ever see a world that's cloudy and gray? Oh, then you feel like me. Ever since she went away. You lie awake at night, praying for daylight. Seems like daylight never comes. And in the morning light, things still ain't right. All you can do is think of why she ain't here tonight. Did you ever hurt like a knife right through your heart? Yeah. Did you ever reach out for her in the dark? Did you ever feel? Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises. I want to thank those guys for being our main sponsors, along with a couple of others. But these are the guys who help out every single week and allow us to do. Look, we've done a little bit of some enhancement to our equipment, and of course, I not only do the two shows here from the Cattaraugus Territory of Seneca Nation, but I travel to New York each week to do a show in the Big Apple, trying to tell our story and offer a Native perspective to the issues that affect us all in the city the size of New York. So I'm grateful for that help, but I'm also grateful for those of you who listen to the show each week and share the show and encourage other people to listen. Those of you who share the Facebook live stream, and those of you who have the group pages that allow us to share the live stream on your pages. So that's how we continue this conversation. Look, I know that the perspective that I offer very often is not the widely held perspective, but as we have these conversations, more and more people are coming to the realization that there's something to what we are talking about here on this show, and I'm getting more and more of a response to whether we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women or whether we're talking about these environmental concerns, all of that stuff. So look, these are the conversations that we need to have, whether you agree with my perspective or not. These are the conversations we need to have. We need to hash this stuff out, but at some point we need to move back beyond those conversations, and that's part of the reason I got my friend James Gray Sogoyeta on the line. And one of the things that we've been talking about, James, has been trying to move past something that we've been doing for years and years and years, which is meeting after meeting after meeting, where we talk about various things that we're facing, the problems that we have in front of us, and oftentimes never getting to meaningful solutions. We end up being very reactive when there's a situation, whether it's the Oka crisis back in the 90s, or whether, again, Standing Rock, or, whether we're battling somebody, squaring off with police, or, or whomever. I mean, we only respond. We don't plan ahead, and we don't create um, uh, our own even informational infrastructure so we can do the things that we need to do to step up and defend our territories, our people, and again, even as it relates to our women and children. So, you and I were talking about trying to, especially with this missing and murdered indigenous women issue. Um, Look, we all know what it is. I mean, the numbers are all out there. We know how vulnerable, Native women are. I mean, 1 in 2 Native women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetimes. We know what these numbers are. We know what the suicide rates are. We know what the teen pregnancy issues are. We know, the number of women who turn up missing, and how many of them, are written off as either runaways, or when we find, that our women have lost their lives, how many of them are written off as suicides when we know there's a lot more questions to be asked. We know all those numbers, but we don't get to the point where we actually start to do anything. And I know that, you and I are still trying to raise awareness and do some of that stuff. That's why, that's why I designed the murdered and missing Indigenous women flag that I'm still yet trying to get the resources together to do a run of flags and distribute them. I printed out a few shirts along the way to familiarize people with at least an acronym, the MMIW. So people say, "Hey, what is that?" And then we can have that conversation. But this. So guys like you and I, we do step up and we try to do in our own within our own capacity, do what we can, but we don't organize to do it. And I think that's something that you mentioned earlier, when we spoke earlier today. And I want to expand on that thought a little bit.
Yeah, like you said, we've always dealt with these things, and what are we going to do? And we seem to have meetings after meetings, and what's going to happen, and basically it turns to nothing happens, and we still know all this. We still want to be involved. In fact, what really got me going this year is an activist warrior from Manitoba. His name is Stan Cote. He's a friend of mine, and he was talking one night, and his son went missing for one weekend. I guess they couldn't find him. They couldn't be in touch with him, and he went through the whole process of trying to report him as missing. And he said he had a hell of a time, And then he was mad, and he was on his Facebook thing that he puts on, and he was talking, and he was saying, what are we gonna do? He says, as warriors, as men, how come we don't take care of this issue? We seem like we're not doing anything to help this out, and we just don't seem to accomplish it. And so I got a hold of him, and I says, you're absolutely right what you're saying. We have to tackle some issues like these. We got to do it right now. And so we talked about it, and we're trying to organize ourselves as warriors, both men and women, that are going to deal with this thing. In the whole situation of missing and murdered women, you have women who are doing this thing. The women are out there. They're out there having the marches, having everything going on. They're talking about putting up billboards on the territories just to show the people that, hey, we're looking into this thing. And I've had discussions with some of them, and they're talking about, the government, having the government pass some regulations, and, but both you and I know that whether the government passes this or not, it's not going to solve the issue. The issue has to be solved by our people. And our people have to take these things into consideration. It's like the drug issue. We had a meeting in one time years ago with the tribal police because there was an issue with the drugs, and we met with them, and myself, I told him, I says, we'll deal with it. You know, we'll deal with it. You guys just have to stay out of it and keep your noses out of it. And I said, but the problem that's going to happen is if we straighten the issue and we stop these things from happening, you're going to turn around and arrest us for what we did because you're using the outside laws, you know. And they just looked at us and said, well, yeah, we'll have to do something if somebody reports it. And so we're falling into those issues. So we have to do it here. And so when I spoke, I've been speaking to a few women that are involved in the missing and murdered women in their areas. I spoke to one lady in Montana, and she's been dealing with it, and she's traveling around that area and trying to put this together there. And I spoke to Lori, who also was doing this stuff and tracking our women who were being put on these ships and sent out, you know, as far as trafficking. And so I've been talking with them, and I had asked the woman from Montana. I says, who are the men helping? And she kind of got like a little, almost like a little chuckle, I guess, and saying, well, it's mainly women, you know. And to me, that was a heartbreaking thing for her to say, because as a man, we need to take the priority to helping our women, you know, working with them and helping to solve these things. And so when Stan and I talked, we talked about doing this, setting up the Warrior Society to be the outkeepers of this stuff, to start investigation, to start going out and helping people look for somebody, whatever it takes, you know. And so that's kind of what we're doing right now. I'm trying to set up meetings to raise monies for this, so we can put equipment, so we can put training out there. And there's a meeting, you know, I've been told by Digalundige, they're setting up a meeting in Guanajuato at the last weekend of July, and they're going to make discussions, and they're going to talk about a little bit about probably Goa, a bit about the Indian Act, you know, whatever. There's so many possibilities that are happening all over the place, but the main thing is getting our peoples together, you know, from all the other territories. It's very hard if we don't have these meetings, and not just this meeting, but the ones that will follow, where we can talk these things, talk these issues. And one of the main issue I have is to sitting down and let's help on this murdered and missing women. And it's not only that, it's men also, and it's kids also.
Yeah, no, we have young men and older men. I mean, look, when I look at what transpired, even coming out of the 70s. I mean, when you looked at what really began the AIM, the American Indian Movement, and some of the fights that were taking place back with them. They started with these white men who were beating up and in some cases killing men, you know, and they were doing it for entertainment. And you know, so when you talk about bounties, I mean, these kinds of things have been going on for a long time, where our people have been not just the victims of these crimes, but really they've been the subject of entertainment for some people on this stuff. So while I think our women have always been vulnerable, so have our men. But I mean, to the other point that you raised with Cote, his son, you know, one of the things that happens, and I mentioned it just briefly earlier on, is when law enforcement is contacted, when the systems that are in place by the outside that are supposed to, you know, help with these situations, they write off our young people as just runaways. You know, not that they've been that anything nefarious has happened to them. And while some may be runaways, the fact is that they can be so dismissive and automatically associate that every child or every young man or young woman who's missing is a runaway. And then when, as I said, the other thing that they do is they try to write off any of these deaths to suicides, That way they don't have to investigate, and there doesn't have to be any criminal investigation. So this is the way they marginalize our people. And of course, the other thing that can't be missed in all of this is that the reason that we do have a runaway problem in some of our territories is because the absolute lack of any hope for the future in terms of job or any kind of any prospect for the future. What do we tell a 13-year-old boy or a 15-year-old girl about what they're going to do with the rest of their lives when we know that so many of our territories are bound to exist in abject poverty? And you look at some of these territories on either side of that imaginary line. I mean, Pine Ridge is an easy target, but you look across any native territory. I mean, even in a place like here in Seneca Territory, Cattaraugus, which by many standards is fairly affluent, but there are still 30% of the population here on Cattaraugus and Allegheny are living below the poverty line. So the opportunities, in spite of gaming and tobacco and all that other stuff, the opportunities for our people to really do something meaningful with their lives become very limited. And that's why we have some of these situations where we've got young people who have no hope for the future. And that creates not just risky behavior, but it also puts them in as prime targets to be exploited by the outside. And so it's a combination of all of those things.
Yeah, and it's also the system, the welfare system that they put in, the child welfare system that they put in. I mean, Stan, my friend there, his daughter was in that system, and she was abused, and just recently, and hopefully she's getting out of the hospital this week. She's been in there for like a month, maybe a little more. She was abused in that system. They had her in their detention home in Winnipeg, and they're going to go after the system for what they did to her and what they can stop from other ones. So it's the whole system that they put in. And that doesn't just happen in Canada where he is, but it happens on this side. And what do our kids need to do? They know that, okay, now I'm going to dispute something, and then I'm going to be turned into this bad person, and I'm going to have to deal with the welfare system.
Well, and again, when we talk about the actions that we need to take and not just as men, but as the adults, I guess, the ones who should be looking after that next generation coming up, if we don't provide something that gives them hope for the future, then who's going to do it? I mean, we sure as hell can't expect the provinces or the states or the Canadian or U.S. federal governments to do anything. They've managed quite comfortably to place us out of view in territories that are isolated, that are again living in some of these impoverished conditions where we still have people freezing to death every winter, and even as they run pipelines, with fossil fuels that are going to run cars and heat homes elsewhere, we have our own people who are freezing to death in the wintertime. This is what, and this is something that we as men in every one of our territories, if we work together, if we put some infrastructure together, and I don't mean bridges and and buildings, I mean communication infrastructure, so we know how to ask for help. Now, look, if somebody turns up missing and we've got to get them a bus ticket home, or maybe we've got to put them in a car and take them home. I mean, all of this stuff requires not just some financial resources, but it requires a commitment amongst people to work together to solve these problems.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing, is the commitment among the people. We've survived for hundreds of years, without this so-called money that everybody talks about.
Thousands of years. Yeah.
It's good. It's good we could have that to supplement some of the things, but the commitment's got to be within our people again. Yep. We got to learn to unite again and work towards that. Work towards us. Let's not work towards the American or Canadian government by running in Parliament, becoming an MP or a congressman or senator. Work towards us.
Yeah, I mean, every one of these guys who find success in their political systems, also find themselves in a situation where they are the ones that they're the first line that we have to fight against. And
Yeah.
so I mean, and I'm not saying people don't do this with the best of intentions. I think some people, look, you and I have had friends of ours that were close with us for many, many years who finally lost patience and they changed their view on how to affect change. So how many people have we seen who next thing you know ran for tribal council, or perhaps who even went farther than that? They decide they're gonna run for some state office or federal office, and or provincial office. I mean, and when I look at, Murray Sinclair comes to mind. I mean, here's this guy who people promoted as being this strong advocate for Native issues. He ends up being the chair or the main person behind this Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I gotta say it, when this was related to the residential schools, when he writes his final report, he uses this expression: yes, these residential schools were constituted cultural genocide. And everybody's, oh yeah, he called them genocide. And no, he didn't. He called it cultural genocide. And so they end up softening a word that while it wasn't, the word genocide was not developed for us. It was dealing with some of the problems that were happening in Europe in coming out of World War II, where those European nations were trying to wipe each other out. So they come up with this word which talks about how you create the conditions where people cease to exist. Now, there's no question that when they coined this phrase to deal with the atrocities white people were committing against each other, there was no way you could avoid not applying that word to what they were doing to us as well. So when we take that word and then we put a word in front of it, and it's one of our own people who does it, there's no such thing as cultural genocide. I mean, you can make a people cease to exist by wiping out their culture, but that's not cultural genocide. It's just genocide. So,
right.
To your point, we aren't going to be well served, by becoming a part of that system. We have a stronger position being outside of that system, because once we're in it, then we're saying that system is what we've accepted. And so whether for better or worse, it's like when you go into a court willingly and you want the court to resolve your problem. If they rule against you, the very act of going into that court for resolution means that if they ruled against you, that you got to accept it. Now, if you get dragged into court, if somebody forces you into a certain circumstance, and you can say, look, this isn't my system, and I'm not going to accept its ruling. I mean, look, I've been there. I've spent more time than I choose to think behind bars, and never did I accept what they what their determinations were, and I can say that with a certain amount of pride, but it's not to condemn people who have to figure their way out of those situations, but we can't rely on their systems, and I guess that's my point.
Yeah, well, I've been in that system too, when they put that raid on the casino, which was closed down for 3 months already, and then they raided. And they charged us with all this stuff, and which they made up again. And I didn't take part in that. I didn't turn myself in,
I think somebody helped you. If I remember correctly, there was somebody we both know that helped move you from one place to another, if I recall.
Yep. Yeah. Everybody, and there was a lot of people who helped,
I wasn't the only one. Oh, did I say that? No, I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one aiding and abetting your your fugitive status, but no, I mean, you're right. You got criticism. I mean, there were people who were telling you, "Oh no, just turn yourself in. Turn yourself in." Oh hell, there was. I mean, because here was the reality of your situation. You had a sick little girl at home,
right?
And there was no way in hell that you were going to sacrifice the time that you had to spend with your daughter, who was very ill. I mean, to the point that you lost your daughter.
Yeah.
And the fact is that there were people who were telling you, no, just turn yourself in.
Yeah.
And I don't think there wasn't even a question as far as I was concerned. There was no question that you were doing the right thing. But again, our own people can be twisted about their whether they think it's their faith in that system or whatever. But no, you took some heat for standing strong against that. I remember.
Yeah, and when I did that, first of all, I was in the same position you said that, she was very ill and I needed to be there. So I said to myself and to my family, well, I guess I'm going to go when we get back home, I'll turn myself in so I can be out to be doing this thing. And then my daughter and my wife and said to me, especially my daughter, she says, "Why are you going to do that?" She says, "All my life," she says, "I've been here, and you've told me how sovereign we were, how
Hmm.
how free we are." And she says, "And you're going to turn yourself in?"
Well, and
She
both your
said,
daughter and your wife said
"Yeah,
they're not going to let you
yeah."
go.
She
They
says,
they
"No
had a
way."
very foreboding view of what was coming. So no,
Yeah,
I supported. I remember talking to your wife in particular. I said, no, I
yeah.
think he's absolutely right to stay away. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, so they played a big influence into reminding me of who I was and what I am.
Well, and that gets
You know,
back to your point about the role that women and the fact that they are taking the front on, and not only the front but really the burden on this missing and murdered Indigenous women, and shame on the men for not stepping up more. Look, I'm not trying to to take this battle away from them. I want to lighten the burden that so many women are taking because they don't seem to have the men supporting them, and I don't think it's because men don't want to do something. I just think that we have been, too many men have felt like they've been rendered powerless,
yeah,
and I think we have to empower each other. We have to empower our youth, and we have to, stand with, not just behind, but stand with our women on this issue.
yeah, that's right.
So no, I mean this is I think it's really important, and one of the things that because we are running short on time, that I spent some significant time in developing this design for this murdered and missing Indigenous women flag,
Yeah,
and I know you and I are going to work to try to get some of these things printed up, and and again, this isn't something that I'm trying to sell. I mean, if
right.
I do put a price tag on any of them, it's only going to be to the possibility of printing more. But for the most part, I'm going to look. I'm going to use some of my own resources and see what I can do to raise some money so I can get these things printed and distributed. Then I don't want to just do handheld flags. I want to do 3x5 flags, maybe 5x8 flags. Some of the one of the things that inspired me to design this flag in the first place was as I went from territory to territory. Especially on the U.S. side, I saw all these POW and MIA flags, those black flags and everybody had them flying, even at these tribal council buildings all over the place. I mean, there's probably a half dozen of them flying right here on the Seneca Nation territory of Allegheny. So, and that's not even a thing anymore. I mean, it's not like we have native people who are, that anybody's actively trying to get, missing in action people from Vietnam or any place else, and I'm not saying it's not a thing, but it's not as significant a thing to us as what we're facing with this missing and murdered Indigenous women. So that's why I wanted to develop a flag that I thought could be an iconic image that people could come to know what the issue is, and that's what I'm hoping we can do. And I appreciate you stepping up and helping me get these things into print and distributed. So
Yeah, and besides what I'm doing, I'm not going to be the one taking charge. I'm going to be there to help. And that's what I'm thinking.
yeah, I want to
I
hand
don't
these
want
over to women actually.
I don't want charge, to be the one that, oh yeah, he's doing this, he's doing that. No, that's not what I want. I want the people, like you said, we all need to stick together again.
Hmm.
And that now has to be men and women standing there and then our children following. And our children will follow what we do.
Yeah, again, if we have any intention to create hope for the future, because it's one of these things. People say, "Well, what is the main incentive for revolution, for change?" Well, anybody who thinks that the main thing that's going to affect change is adversity, or even poverty, or a tough lifestyle. No, that's not isn't what makes people change. In fact, people will adapt and they'll learn to put up with what is insufferable. What the only thing that inspires change is hope. is when you say, no, there's an alternative to what we're living through. We don't have to live like this. When you can face the reality that you can affect change and you have hope to offer, that's when change happens. So that's what we have to do. And so James, I want to thank you for joining me today. And we'll definitely follow up on this conversation. I do plan to get Lori was going to join me, but apparently she had the nerve to go and have a baby this weekend.
Yeah, she was in labor actually, and she gave me a call. And her husband, I could hear him. You got to get off that phone. Like,
she's still trying to work. Be an activist even if she's in labor. That's incredible.
Yeah,
that's incredible,
yeah.
Man. I'll take my hats off to this woman. All right, James. Well, we'll have you back on. We'll talk about this more, and we'll make sure the listening audience gains more information about as we move forward with the flags and other things. So
yeah, and I'm glad you got your phone system working, because I'm tired of calling your cell phone and you don't listen to me.
Well, you're still on my cell phone, but no.
Oh, am I?
Yeah, that's how I connected you. Yeah.
Oh,
it's all modern technology,
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, we'll definitely have you back on, so I appreciate it.
Okay.
And we'll get you in studio next time so people can see
All
you
right.
too.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks
All
for
right.
joining me.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening. This is again, that's my friend Sogoyeta. That's James Gray, my friend from Akwesasne. Been at this for a long time. He and I together, not alone, but we have been among the two that have been involved in the Riscat Raget and Longhouse for many years. So, and we're still at it. So, we'll keep you informed as we move forward. Some of what we're doing, and again, we're going to continue to have the conversation. Let's talk Native. This is John Kane. Yahweh.